Each of us has such a person. You may still have one. I'm talking about the hated boss. You know who I'm talking about, the guy you might have a beer with. Maybe you'll talk about football or baseball or maybe even hockey. But there are certain topics that are prohibited. I mean, absolutely prohibited. He could buy you a beer and they would still be illegal. Heck, he could buy you a bottle of the good stuff and they'd still be illegal if you were still sober enough to talk at all. My name is Archie, like Bunker, but Jones will do. My wife's name is Edith. Now you see the connection and understand why we are often teased by friends, neighbors, colleagues, and that lady who goes from table to table selling roses on our evening out. Archie and Edith Jones, this is my wife and me. We live in a big city and both make good money for our area. It's warm here all year round, and the only time we have to take out the electric blanket is when a cold front passes through. I think the last time we got him, well, it was a long time ago. One thing is for sure, when your air conditioner breaks down, we fix it faster than a dog runs away from a cat fight. We are both still very young. At this point, we had only been married a month or two past our 4th anniversary. Edith and I have been together as boyfriend and girlfriend since the first day of summer vacation after our freshman year of high school. She was going to spend the summer with her aunt in Virginia. So, before she left, we decided to make a promise that we would be a permanent couple when she returned. We sealed that promise by giving each other our virginity the night before she left. When she returned in the fall, we spent a lot of time hiding from our families until we got to know each other really, really well. I'm talking about knowing someone in the biblical sense. The end of school has arrived for both of us. We were able to get a job, exchanged rings, and then the never-ending sex began, at least for a while. But as everyone knows, neither man nor woman can live by love alone, no matter how hard they try. I think it was inevitable that we would fall into a rut. After all, we had been together for what seemed like a lifetime. Only a few years have passed. For young people like us, a lifetime can be crammed into a month without mom's cooking. We gave each other our virginity, and to be honest, we had never tried with another sexual partner. At least I haven't tried it. I couldn't speak for Edith. She was my first love, and I was hers. That's what I thought, but now I realized that my ideal life was just a fantasy. The day the wheels fell off the bus was an unforgettable day. My wife Edith and I have just finished dancing. You know this dance. The one where she tells me I need to lose a few pounds, and I just keep going. Well, I enjoyed the feeling of her body hugging me. Since we both work, we don't always have time or the mood for what we just finished. The afterglow of that moment flew out the window when she said, "You know what your boss told me today?" "No, honey. What did my boss say to you today?" I said the words loud enough for her to hear. Please remember, I was busy absorbing the fluids of our love. She didn't even slow down. Just as boldly as in the bronze, she announced, "He said if I sleep with him, he'll give you a promotion and a raise." I sat up so fast that I must have scared her because her knee went up like a Saturn rocket. Regardless of the culprit, there was a lot of screaming, swearing, and tears. It poured out of me in the first 3 seconds. Afterwards, I looked up at my wife's stunned face. I hit my head on the nightstand, bounced off the dresser, knocked over a lamp, which hit me right in the middle of my forehead. That's when the pain hit the middle of my back, and I think I blacked out. Let's not kid ourselves. I know I blacked out. That's the only explanation for why I woke up with some dude in an angel costume shining a bright light in my eyes. There was a lot of noise. Someone shouted, "He's coming to his senses." More angels appeared, more bright lights, and I was convinced. I died and went to heaven, and all these angels threw me a party because I made the cut. Then I realized that it was Tai-O, not Tai-O-O. One of them meant that I was alive, and the other meant that I was in heaven. My wife's proposal statement from my boss was still bouncing off the walls of my brain as my mind began to come back into focus. There were tubes protruding from my body as if I was the center of the universe. The first real words I could understand were, "Calm down." There she was. When this angel entered the room, it was like the parting of the Red Sea. Everyone stepped aside as she strode with her confidence. She had headphones on and kept talking and giving orders left and right. She held my hands, checked my beautiful blue eyes, squeezed my fingers. She threw back the blankets, and I felt her gentle and almost exciting touch on my thigh. She came to the foot of my bed and gave me more orders, and I complied with each request to the fullest. Now that I knew that these were not angels at all, but a bunch of nurses and a lot of aspiring doctors, I was able to relax. Slowly, they started removing the wires that were keeping me from moving too much. Someone picked up the needle, and within a second or two, I was back in the dream world. I didn't really dream. I was back in that black hole. But it was a very soft hole, and one of those that I liked. When I regained consciousness, I was watching TV. Angels came in and out of my world. But according to TV, I was a butterfly for about 2 days when I asked about my wife. Very professionally, they said they told her. What's going on here? I've been watching cartoons on TV for the past 2 days and still haven't seen my wife. In fact, they took that clicker away from me, so I could only watch what they, a group of angels now turning into devils, wanted me to watch. But then there was my perfect light and truth. She came 2 or 3 times a day, saying she just wanted to check on me. If she was there, I was fine. She looked at my card on the little computer, snapped her fingers, and all the angels came back into the room to tend to me. So I waited for her blessing with my presence. On the 3rd day after I emerged from the cocoon, there was a rumble in the corridor outside my door. The door opened and my wife, dressed to the nines, entered the room and walked into my confined space. "Oh, Archie, 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 are you okay, honey?" She crossed the room to start planting kisses all over my face. Sadly, none of these kisses will bear fruit. They were doomed to die in a circle of bright red lipstick, which I immediately began to wipe off with a napkin. What does this phrase mean? Dressed to perfection. I think when I was in the living world, people would have said I was dressed like a 2, maybe a 3, but never a 9. As I got my wife to calm down a little, I saw my boss standing in the doorway. What the hell is he doing here? Oh, don't worry, honey. Rusty brought me straight to the hospital when I told him you woke up from your coma. Why did you tell my boss that I woke up from a coma when he was the one who put me in the coma to begin with? I don't know what expression I had on my face, but it wasn't pleasant. I've been conscious for 3 days now. Where the hell have you been? Oh, honey, you've been unconscious for so long. Now this raises an excellent question. How long was I in the cocoon? The answer to this question has just entered the room. My angel has come for his regular visit. As I live and breathe, Rusty, the most hated person in my life at the time, drooled all over my doctor's ass. That alone would make me want to get out of this bed and kick his ass. But for some reason, I couldn't move. Rusty was one lucky bastard. At least he was lucky on this day at this time. But the time will come. I promised myself. The time will come. A couple of alarms went off, and my angel doctor began clearing the room of infestations around my bed. Then, after she completed her regular checkup, she allowed my wife to return. I told her at that moment that if Rusty the bastard came in again, it would be bad as hell. Then they told me that I was in a coma for more than 3 months. My angel told me that they have more pictures of my brain and spine than they have of patients in the hospital. She told me that they didn't find anything on the scans, but that I was bleeding severely at the time of the incident. There was fear of brain damage, but they found no damage. I think I didn't have a brain to begin with, or the one I had was too tough to damage. It was ridiculous. After all, I was in a coma for 3 months. I was then told that they had put me in an induced coma to protect me from any invisible harm. The word from my angel sounded acceptable to me, and I calmed down a little from the shock of knowing that my wife was spending her free time with my boss, Rusty, the Serpent. My wife stayed with me for a couple of hours. It was time for the injection so I could calm down and rest for the rest of the day until lunch. This injection turned into my release. I woke up a few hours later, and she was gone. The next day, I had surgery to restore normal bowel function. She gave me a choice: slowly and carefully or quickly and finish it all at once. I chose slowly and carefully. Then her hand twitched, and my eyes filled with tears, and I began to repeat the mantra, "Oh damn, I got good medicine, but it wasn't that good." Later, when I was put back in bed and the bleeding had stopped, my wife was sitting next to the bed. My lunch came while I was out of the room, but she ate it. So, being a freshly hatched butterfly, I was able to convince a couple of nurses to call the cafeteria and ask for something special. They gave me soft food and jelly. I would have killed for pizza, but I understood why they did it, and I had to accept it or go hungry. You know what will happen next. The terrible rehabilitation stage was next. For some strange reason, I had to relearn some things I've done my whole life. Learning to walk again. Wait a minute, I can walk. Wait until I get up off the floor, and I'll show you how people walk. Luckily, it didn't take long to figure out the left and right leg. Feeding myself with a bib and my wife standing next to her, twitching as if she had missed something more important happening in the world. Just go, "Okay, I think I can handle this." I started to lose patience with my wife. She didn't slow down. If I had known it would be this easy, I would have kicked her out sooner. Finally, the day of my release arrived. Thank God I'm going home. When the nurse wheeled me out to the front door of the building, I was so happy. Not only will it not last long, I knew I wouldn't drive, but I thought my wife would show me a little respect. When they closed the back door and I was settled in, I looked forward and guess who was driving? Oh, come on, it wasn't my wife, but the guy who sent me to this place in the first place. Yes, it was good old Rusty, my boss. When I saw the back of my head, I almost threw up in the back seat of my car. Well, it was my wife's car, but I make payments. Doesn't that give me a claim? I think it was my own stupid fault. During all my time in the hospital or rehab, I didn't question why Rusty was even there. Rusty visited me in the hospital, but I think I would have done that too if one of my co-workers or friends had been injured. Of course, that makes sense, doesn't it? Edith realized that I had no time for visitors, so she sent Rusty home. I had instructions from my angel, an elegant, very sexy-looking female doctor from the hospital. I know it sounds crazy, but when I think about her, I feel better. Maybe it was because when she leaned over to check my eyes or check my reactions by probing parts of my body, I felt a slight tingling sensation. I'll miss our flirting a little. Well, no big deal. The view down her robe was, by any standards, a stimulating sight. It felt a little strange to walk into my bedroom for the first time since the incident. I was tired, so I welcomed the feeling of non-hospital sheets and the lack of that aroma that lets you know you're not in heaven. Unfortunately, it's been so long since I was last in bed that I've even forgotten what it's supposed to smell like. Strange, I thought. This isn't something my wife puts in the dryer to make everything smell fresh. Okay, I'm tired. I need to rest. When my strength was restored after a short sleep, I went to the kitchen, following the delicious smell of the promised home-cooked meal. What the hell, I thought, looking at the 2 dirty cups in the sink and 2 plates with the remains of scrambled eggs and potatoes. Next to them lay 2 unwashed forks and knives. Who puts ketchup on their eggs like me? I asked myself a question. After a couple of seconds of further investigation, I realized that it was not my wife. She doesn't put ketchup on anything at all. When she entered the kitchen, I was sitting at the table. I don't think I doubted her loyalty explicitly. But I'll tell you one thing, it's not like she was the only one who sat at my dinner table in the last 3 months. She leaned over and kissed my balding head as she passed by. Yes, there is a slightly less hairy area on the back of my head. Do you think we should talk about the elephant in the room? I asked. She made her face look like it came out of a box of Cracker Jacks. What are you talking about, dear? Don't make that smug face and ask me what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Damn it, woman, I don't see this guy that much at work, let alone at the hospital. Confused, she immediately returned to her standard defense. I just don't know what you're talking about, Archie. I'm talking about Rusty, the man who offered to give me a raise if you slept with him. This guy, Remember him? I swear to all that is holy. This woman acted as if I had been living on another planet for the last time. Archie, darling, I will never do anything like that. You know that I love only you and no one else. She reached out her hand and placed it on mine. Now I remember. Things were starting to become a little clearer. What do you remember, dear? She asked, clearly hoping that I would forget the question. I remember the smell on my pillow when I was resting during the day. I stopped and looked around as if I had just thought of something important. It's the same cologne that Rusty bathes in after his shower. It's so strong that his office stinks of it at work. She faked a laugh and said, "These sheets are fresh. I just put them on yesterday." That's exactly what I mean. Rusty slept in my bed last night, making love to my woman, taking advantage of my absence. Suddenly, I stood up. I was furious. I screamed, and with my blood ready to boil from my body, I felt weak. Slowly, and as calmly as possible, I sat back down. My eyes were drilling holes into my wife. I don't need to hear some bullshit about how he helped change the sheets, or how he painted the ceiling, or how he helped you check the mattress to see if it was firm enough. I need to know what the hell is going on. Edith began to cry. She covered her face with her hands and began to repeat the phrase over and over again. "Forgive me. Please forgive me." I had to wait a few moments for my mind to catch up with my body. When this happened, my thoughts were all over the place. It was difficult to understand what I had just heard. Constant sobs and pleas for forgiveness. What will this story be about? Finally, I pulled myself together, and the first thing I did was try to calm Edith down to the point where I could at least understand the one word she was trying to say. She was crying and trying to speak at the same time, and it was just a stream of words that didn't mean anything. Even if someone tied everything together, it would force the programmer to scratch his head. So I had to wait until she calmed down enough to understand what she was trying to say. I lost my job. She finally managed to choke out between sobs. "Okay, you lost your job. When did this happen?" I asked. "A week before our accident." Here comes my blood pressure again. "You lost your job and didn't feel the need to tell me." "I came to your factory and Rusty was there." "You told my boss you lost your job before you told me?" "That's 10 more points to my blood pressure." "Well, he was so understanding and everything." "Yes, he understood his situation to such an extent that he ended up in my bed. Now I was close to fainting from the pressure on my chest. But when you went to the hospital, he kept you on the payroll and gave you a promotion to boot." "Jesus Christ, woman," I practically shouted. "So you've been giving away your benefits ever since I went to the hospital?" "Well," she stopped. "Actually, it was a few days before we had the accident." "You mean you already slept with him before you told me about his proposal?" My whole body was ready to explode with rage. I stopped only for a moment to catch my breath. "Well, I have news for you, and for him, and for the whole damn world. You can all kiss my ass." I think, and I'm not sure, but I think that's when I lost consciousness. The next thing I remember is a pretty girl looking at me through the plastic mask I was wearing to breathe. There was a lot of noise from sirens sounding very close, and for some reason my wife was holding my hand. I mean, why did she hold my hand when I wanted to knock her down? The hospital checked me and said I was fine. They were going to keep me overnight to make sure I didn't hurt myself. This suited me. I may see my special angel again. When I asked the night nurse about her, she said that she had been transferred to another hospital. Suddenly, there was no point in going to the hospital. Damn, I tolerated my wife's presence in my room for a while, and then finally convinced her to go home. We could finish our argument another time. The next morning, I got up bright and early. I called my brother to see if I could stay with him and his wife for a few days until I found a place to hide from Edith. The doctors at the hospital have already told me that I cannot return to work for another 2 weeks, and even then I will need to undergo a bunch of tests. But at least this time I had a complete picture of my life and was going to deal with it by any means necessary. How unlucky I am. One of the nurses told my wife about my plans, and I was to meet her again. I was sitting on the edge of the bed when she came in with a face like something out of Mad magazine. Without makeup, her hair hadn't seen a comb or combs since the previous day. She was ready for a serious conversation, and she didn't want to listen to my crap. Archie, I did what I thought was necessary to survive. I just didn't know what to do. Your boss said he would help me, and I was stupid enough to believe him. She walked up to the bed, looking at me. It worked. I felt like a puppy who had just peed on the carpet. Now, what do you want to do? Do you want to run and hide, or do you want to help me get revenge on that bastard? Completely caught off guard. From where I'm sitting right now, you're the one who ruined everything. I was just trying to make our lives a little better. Who are we talking about now? Rusty, you idiot. Edith was on a roll, and I knew I couldn't stop her. I think we should give him a good squeeze. She moved away from the bed and sat down on a chair. When we're done, if you want, we can get a divorce or try to put this mess back together. When you talk about a mess, you mean us. You think we can burn his ass and then kiss and make up. You know I'm a good kisser. She smiled, perhaps sensing a crack in my armor. Showing interest in her plan to get revenge on Rusty, I asked, "What do you mean?" I hate to say it, but we're going to have to act like everything is normal for a while. I saw the wheels of revenge spinning in her head. It took me a couple of moments for the word normal to register in my mind. When this happened, the reality of that comment rang a false note. You mean you have to keep having this guy until we come up with a plan? My hand rose into the air and began to wave from side to side. Before I could say anything else, my brother, his wife, and the nurse entered the room. The nurse, like someone who should be in charge, waited until all the hugging and happy greetings were over before she said anything. "Mr. Jones, I have conducted the inquiry you requested regarding Dr. Daniels." I simply nodded, waiting for an answer about my angel. "Dr. Daniels is at Mercy Medical Center across town," she said with a smile. I paused for a moment to appreciate the nurse's strange smile. "Is there a problem with Dr. Daniels?" "Not one bit. She's the best in her field. But you know she's a little different from the average female doctor." Everyone in the room understood what the nurse was saying before I did. "But those? The best money can buy," she said, smiling a full smile. "And this ass?" "Same answer," she said. The stunned look on my face must have been priceless. No one spoke, but everyone smiled like a monkey throwing droppings at people at the zoo. Well, I'm lost. There was nothing more to say. I had a crush on a girl who was a guy, and she was beautiful. I wonder if I should admit this while my wife is in the room, or should I call her my unfaithful wife? Because everyone was looking at me, waiting for a comment. All I could come up with was, I was hoping that she, or maybe. If you think I was at a loss for words, you're right, but I kept digging that hole. Maybe I could get someone's parole to go back to work. My brother came to the rescue. "Let's get out of here and find a place where we can think about all this." As if on cue, another nurse entered the room with a folder full of papers and instructions, and after another 30 minutes, we were on our way home. I wasn't going to get in the car with my wife, so my brother and I were in one car, my wife and my sister-in-law were in the other. "How bad is this situation?" asked my brother, John Paul. Without turning my face away from the window to look at him, I said, "This is really bad." "What happened? Did you catch Edith cheating or something?" When I turned to look at him, I saw all the unanswered questions on his face. "Taking care of me and Edith. I think it's, or something like that. I didn't catch her cheating. She decided to confess." "How does this even work?" he asked. Turning all my attention to my brother, I told him the story as I knew it at the time, and it wasn't that much, as I had spent most of the last time in a coma. "She lost her job and somehow confessed it to Rusty, my boss. This is exactly what he needed. Rusty immediately intervened and offered to help her, making her an offer she could not refuse. I turned away. and she didn't refuse. So what are you going to do? My marriage is a bunch of crap, so I think I'll go out on the market again and see if I can find anyone looking for the same thing as me. JP chuckled. And what is it? Brother, when I figure this out, I promise you'll be the second one to find out. We laughed just as JP turned his truck towards his house. When the engine stopped and he took out the key, he looked at me and said, "Do me one favor. Don't put it off until later. You and Edith need to sit down and decide what you're going to do. Then we can do whatever you decide with Rusty." He paused for a moment, then with the most serious face I've ever seen on a brother. "This is going to be tough, probably harder on you than you think, but don't drag it down thinking you still have a chance to get over it. I can see right now, I don't think either of you have the strength to fight for what you had." I didn't think I could answer now, but he was right. There was no point in putting it off and letting her think that there might be a chance, or something close to a possibility, that we could continue to live the lie. It sounded strange in my mind, knowing that she had confessed her sins and I was willing to hide my private thoughts. That's when Edith and my sister-in-law, Pam, walked into the room. Before anyone could speak, John told his wife that Edith and I needed a few minutes alone. Pam knew why we needed time alone just by the look on her husband's face. Edith and I went down to the basement and I heard her full story. When I began to insist, it turned out that Rusty was not the first. He was something like the third or fourth. She said those were the shifts I worked. She couldn't help but feel lonely or confused by the signals she was receiving from other men. I explained to her as best I could that all men are dogs, and so am I. Then I admitted that I had feelings for my special doctor at the hospital. It was at that moment that I saw that she accepted the fact that nothing would work out for us. When I asked her why it took 3 days to come to the hospital when I came out of the coma, she said she wouldn't lie to me anymore. She was in Las Vegas with Rusty, and he didn't want to come home, and neither did she. So all this crying and asking for forgiveness was just a ploy to get on my good side. "Archie," she said in all seriousness, "you were unconscious for 3 months, and by then I thought I was in love with Rusty. So you just stayed with him instead of coming to me." Tears began to form in her eyes. "Yes, actually, I was sure that Rusty and I would end up together." "What changed your mind?" I also began to feel the weight of my feelings. She took the time to lean back in her chair and look around the room as if the answer was written on a sign hanging on the wall. Shaking my head. Rusty was in the shower in our hotel room in Vegas and his phone rang. It was his ex-wife. I told her he was in the shower. Instead of screaming and cursing, she calmed down and told me what I was getting into with Rusty. I hung up, and when Rusty got out of the shower, I told him that his ex called and she wanted to know when he was going to pay off his child support. That's when her expression changed from confident to hateful. That same day, I received a call from the district clinic informing me that I had gonorrhea for the second time. I missed her comment about gonorrhea. "I didn't know he had kids," I said, laughing quietly to myself. "I didn't know either. I didn't even know he was married. He has 3 kids, and he gets to spend 1 weekend a month with them." Shaking a finger, as if pointing at me. "I dated him, no matter how long, and I've never seen those kids yet. I don't know how old they are, or if they're boys or girls. All I know is that he's a terrible person to his children. What does this say about him as a person? And don't forget, he gave you gonorrhea twice." I know she saw me smile. I just knew it. "Then why did you stay with him?" "If I tell you, you'll get upset. You'll start screaming again, and then you'll end up back in the hospital. You know one of us will file for divorce after we get our revenge on Rusty," I said, pointing out the obvious. "Knowing what I know now, I don't think you can surprise me, so we better be honest with each other." This was the first time since this all started that I wasn't furious. I could look into her eyes and see that she was no longer the same woman I carried across the threshold 4 short years ago. We talked about kids, a house in the suburbs, and maybe a little travel. But this shouldn't have happened. With a serious expression on her face, she began to free her soul from pain. "Remember when you accepted the job on the rotation team at the plant?" Of course I remember. We talked about this before I applied. I was due for a pay raise, which would have taken a lot of the financial pressure off of us. Yes, but we didn't take into account that I would be alone. With our work, we were like ships passing each other in the night. When you worked the evening shift, we could only communicate through sticky notes on the refrigerator. The night shifts seemed endless, and when we both had days off, you did household chores that you couldn't do at other times. Tears began to appear in her eyes. But probably the worst thing was when we were only together for your long weekend. It was crazy. 1 day off every 4 weeks. It was a disaster from the start. Suddenly, I felt more relaxed, realizing the reality of the end of my marriage. I realized that she was right. She cheated, but I was the one who pushed her into unbearable loneliness. Perhaps we should both accept responsibility. Have you ever told me about what bothers you? No, you didn't say a word. I was unhappy too, but all you had to do was open your mouth and tell me. Did I love her enough to fight for us? We were married for a little over 4 years. We both admitted that we were probably too young to get married. At that time, we both wanted to escape from our families. Both of us were not raised in the best families. Let's face it, it wasn't all that happy for either of us. After several minutes of crying, trying to understand that we would no longer be husband and wife, Edith put her arms around my neck and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I loved you once, you know. But I saw what was on the other side of the fence and couldn't resist." She paused for a second or two and then continued, "No matter what they say, if you're looking for green grass on the other side of the fence, it's not there. But the sex was great. He is so magnificent that if you get a chance to find out, don't hesitate to jump over this fence." Who is this woman? I thought to myself. This is clearly not the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. We continued talking for over an hour. I knew it was a waste of time. Finally, when she realized that I was not interested in either the excuses or the details of her infidelities, she agreed that we should join the others. I should probably just wash away all the memories of those few incredible, eye-opening hours I spent listening to Edith talk about her sexual exploits. My nightmares were filled with visions of her resisting our neighbor Bobby Johnson for 2 whole seconds before dragging his ass into our bed. Of course, there was also the story about her in the back seat of her boss's car. Then the big confession about how she started an affair with my boss. It was not at all like what she told me before. She went after him herself. She seduced him at a company picnic a full year before she told me about his offer of sex for a promotion. If she hadn't been fired from corporate HR for giving sexual favors to employees, she would still have a job. But no, not her. She had to fall in love with my boss, Rusty. And then she finds out that that good guy, Rusty, is the biggest bastard in the Northern Hemisphere. At least that's what she says. When we entered the living room, all I saw were a few empty beer bottles and 2 very impatient people. "So, have you guys decided on this revenge so we can move on and call it a night?" My brother was the first to ask. "How the hell do you expect us to solve this? We don't even know this guy." That's when my future ex-wife took the initiative and told everyone everything she knew about Rusty and what we were facing. I added what I knew, and when it was all said and done, no one really knew the bastard any better than before. Everyone drank another beer and agreed to meet in a week. In the meantime, I'll be staying with John Paul and his wife. As for Edith, I didn't care. I waited until next week to call a lawyer for divorce advice. I found his name and number at the bus stop. He handled divorces at what seemed to me a reasonable price. Of course, by this time, I would have paid any money to get rid of Edith. The next morning, I called Edith to let her know what I had done about the divorce, and she said she would agree to whatever I thought was fair. Look who's talking about justice. I was determined that what goes around comes around. I was going to get this son of a bitch. The evening of our next meeting looked as if nothing would work out. We each had a whole week to figure out what we thought would be the best way to get revenge and break Rusty. No one had any good ideas other than to shoot him as he got into his car for work. We could make it look like a gang fight. The vote for this idea was 3-1. Edith was the only one who thought it was a good idea. Another round of beer, and I commented on how he was looking at my dear Angel's ass in the hospital. I saw the lights go on, but I didn't understand what my comment had to do with Rusty's revenge. It took about 30 seconds to get me up to speed, and suddenly we had a plan. We first had to contact Dr. Daniels and then convince her to agree to our plan. I didn't think it would ever happen, but to my surprise, she was willing to do anything she thought would be fun. She even went so far as to give me a tip, but when we told her who the target was, her smile became even brighter. My comment, "I think we have a winner." The plan was really very simple. We're organizing a double date. I'll go with Dr. Daniels as my companion, and Edith will go with Rusty. Now, the hard part was getting Rusty and Dr. Daniels together before the end of the evening. Another very important point. Edith had to make sure that old Rusty was very horny that evening. Remember, Edith boasted earlier that she's a good kisser. Now she had a chance to show off her skills. It was very strange. When I got behind the wheel of my truck, my stomach turned over and I wanted to throw up. I think that's when I realized we only had one chance. If the plan fails, we'll have to rely on Edith's plan, the one that involves guns. Surprisingly, I was now convinced that if it didn't work, I would just step aside and let things take their course. I didn't care anymore. One way or another, it just didn't seem important to me. I was done with Edith, and she could just go her own way. Dinner went according to plan. Everyone had enough to drink except Dr. Daniels. I drank so much that I became jealous of what Rusty and I were doing. I couldn't believe it, but I thought if Rusty didn't go home with Dr. Daniels, I might sacrifice myself for the team. She was hot. I mean really hot. I got a chance to comment on Edith when they returned from the ladies' room. Edith simply smiled and said, "She pees standing up." "Oh," was my response. Someone suggested a club for dancing, and within minutes the four of us were at the club. Rusty didn't know that we had pre-arranged entry. Once we entered, all that was left was to swap partners for a dance or two, and the plan would be complete. The dance floor was packed with merry people. Arms and hands rose into the air to the constant rhythm of the music. As everyone returned to the table to refill their glasses from the bar, I began to fake a sprained ankle. This was Dr. Daniels' signal to take the initiative, and she did. She grabbed Rusty's hand and disappeared into the crowd. As soon as they were out of sight, Edith and I went outside. She walked over to the Uber, and I decided to find a bar and celebrate the end of this nightmare with Edith. I didn't even walk her to the car. When we went outside, I just turned and left. I called her around 2 in the morning to make sure she got home okay. It was the shortest phone call in my life. I have done my duty. Now all that remained was to wait for the divorce. Time has a way of sneaking up on you and leaving you in complete darkness. I know you won't understand such a stupid comment, but it's true. Suddenly you find yourself without a goal. Maybe it's a complete change of direction that you have to take. One day you are happily married with a planned future. The next day you wander around, bumping into nothing. Work, home dinner, and maybe sex with my wife. At least once a week, you discuss when you think you will be ready to start a family. All these ordinary things make up life, and suddenly reality intervenes and takes it all away. I lived with my brother and his wife until I started drooling over the pictures in one of my sister-in-law's fashion magazines. This was the last straw. I found an apartment and moved in with one bed and a few towels. The first week I ate at Max's house, or at the corner bar. The bar gained my attention more and more, and then one evening, unexpectedly, I felt someone tap me on the shoulder. When I turned around to see this brazen intruder, the greatest surprise awaited me. "It's you," I exclaimed with excited surprise. The girl from the ambulance. Oddly enough, in the haze of alcohol, I remembered this face looking at me through a stupid plastic mask. I remembered all the right questions she asked in those circumstances. My most vivid memory of this meeting was the softness of her voice and the beauty of her face looking at me. Luckily, it was a face I remembered fondly. I can see from your empty ring finger that you got rid of the problem you had. Yes, I guess you can say that I got rid of my problem. I reached out to shake her hand. My name is Archie. Yes, I remember. I'm Jane, Jane Willow. I smiled. Now I could finally connect the name with the face that popped up in my memory from time to time. What brings you to such a place on Friday night? Well, she looked around. I was supposed to meet my boyfriend here. I don't think he will come. I'm lucky, I guess. Can I be your entertainment for this evening? I raised my hand to call the bartender for another drink, and she put her hand on mine. I don't drink, she said. I don't date drunks. That's why I'm just waiting for my boyfriend. It's a pity that I can't say the same. Since I got divorced, this seems to be the only thing that helps me not think about what my life or our life could be like. Imbued with empathy, she said, "You really loved her, didn't you?" Looking into her face, I understood the truth for the first time. You know, I don't think so. I didn't love you. I mean, she and I were two kids who wanted to get away from their families. We saw each other as a way to break free. It was the idea of freedom from all rules that apply only to us. Our parents had different rules. We were just there to make their lives easier. Suddenly surprised by my frankness, I said, "Remember, never let me get drunk. I was just making an observation." A little embarrassed, I replied, "I'm sorry, but when you said that about my love for Edith, everything finally fell into place. I mean the reality of the whole situation." I paused to push my drink away. "Thank you for being here, and thank you for helping me realize that my marriage was just an excuse. An excuse to feel like an adult when both of us, Edith and I, were not ready for any kind of commitment. I think you're too hard on yourself. Your marriage was not an excuse or whatever you call it. You were simply too young to make such a commitment." A large group of loud men made the noise in the bar almost unbearable. I had to scream to make my new friend hear me, and she would just shake her head at all the noise. "Do you think your boyfriend will come?" I asked when another loud scream came from a group of men. "At the moment, I don't care. Do you want to find a quieter place?" The expression on her face was almost a plea for someone. Anyone to take her away from this noise. I suggested my favorite place to eat in the area, McDonald's. She shook her head, and we walked outside, enjoying the unexpected silence. The evening air gently blew across my face as we walked the short distance to Mac's house. But as soon as we emerged from the shelter of the buildings, I could smell the refreshing aroma of her perfume. It was a nice distraction from the usual smells of the street. To keep the conversation going, I asked, "Did you say you were married?" "Yes, once, 1,000,000 years ago. I must admit, it was not the happiest time in my life." "And are you divorced now?" "Yes, and as you said, you are also divorced," she answered. I stopped in the middle of the street and gently put my hand on her arm to let her know that I wanted to stop. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Let me understand. You are an amazingly beautiful woman. You have curves that most women don't have, and you were left at a bar you never go to because you don't drink." She smiled widely. "And I go to fast food to talk about things that have nothing to do with anything else." She paused. "And what's most interesting, a man I met only once is leading me there." "Well, how does this fit into your perverted mind?" "Well, I want you to know that I'm going to school, and I'm determined to become a millionaire someday." She almost laughed, but then stopped. "I hope you make it. I hope you get that degree and turn it into $1,000,000. There was a pause for both of us. "You will be a nice millionaire, and I will be able to say that I once knew you." It was sort of the end of the conversation, but I was determined to get through to this woman, no matter the cost. We found an empty table and enjoyed each other's company for a couple of hours when she decided it was time to leave. She called an Uber, and when she got out to leave, I climbed into the car with her. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked. "I hope you don't think I'm just going to let you ride off into the sunset or the moon garden or whatever is going on." I need to know where to pick you up for our next date, I said. The driver also added his 2 cents into the conversation. But the noise quickly died down when she said everything was fine. She handed him the card, and within a second or two, we were off. What was on the card? I asked. My address. He needs to know where he's taking me. A big smile appeared on her face. If you had asked for my address, you would have received a card too. We both started laughing. Is your phone number on this card? She took another one out of her purse and scribbled a number on the back. There. Now you have everything you need. As she got out of the car at her house, she turned and said, if you don't call, I won't lose sleep. When Uber dropped me off at my house, the first thing I did was call the number on the back of the card. She didn't answer. She gave me the number for the prayer service over the phone. I went to bed and slept for about 30 minutes the entire night. Not putting up with her dirty trick, I stood at her door at 6 in the morning the next day. I pressed the doorbell and waited for her to answer. She seemed to fiddle around forever, but when she finally opened the door, I asked her if she had given me the wrong number by accident or if she was trying to convert me. Laughter came from the speaker when she said she wasn't wearing clothes. At this moment, my mind began to work at full capacity. I'm not here to see you dressed. Then what do you need at such an early hour? I paused for just a second. Coffee would be nice. We'll have to drink tea. There was a slight laugh in her voice. I live in number 3 at the end of the corridor on the 2nd floor. The door buzzed and I went inside. I walked up 1 floor and began to wonder if this was the best way to make an impression. I knocked on the door 3 times. There was no expected pause. Door opened. She didn't look around the corner. The door swung wide open. In front of me stood a beautiful blonde with disheveled hair in a nightgown that barely covered her hips. I think my surprise was greater than hers. Judging by the way I was greeted, she was not surprised at all. You didn't call. She smiled, then laughed, stepping back from the door to let me in. Oh God, I thought, where has this goddess been all my life? Standing straight and tall was the sexiest woman I've ever seen. Her blonde hair was pulled back, as if she was trying to comb it with her fingers. She was wearing an old white t-shirt that came down to her knees. The fabric was old and worn, very thin. To my eyes, she might as well be naked. She spoke first. I thought you would call. You know it was the wrong number. Yes, and I'm glad to say that you are the first man to solve this code. She took my hand and led me away from the front door. Code to get into my panties. I stuttered. But you're not wearing panties. There's no need to waste time. Besides, you forgot to kiss me goodnight yesterday. It's not because I didn't want to. At that moment, she hugged me. The first kiss was gentle and inviting. The second kiss was filled with passion and desire. By the time the hour was up, she had not once said that I needed to lose a few pounds. Her lips knew ways to love a man that I had never experienced. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at things, life has not been a bed of roses. Jane and I spent a very happy weekend together. I stayed for incredible sex, plus she had furniture in the apartment, and I only had a bed, a few towels, and a huge TV. I knew Jane was 6 years older than me, but I was happy to be the one who made her happy at night. At least I thought I was making her happy. She came home on a Tuesday evening a week after I invaded her life. That's when a big surprise awaited me. She went into the bedroom, took a shower, and came out, dressed to the nines. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like she was planning on having a good time. You told me we were going somewhere and I just missed it? I asked, admiring the beauty in front of me. You're not going anywhere. I'm going. This completely confused me. I don't understand. I thought we were so good for each other. That's what we are. She looked at her watch. I think now is the time to explain this to you. She put her purse on the table and sat down on the seat opposite me. I tried to tell you from the very beginning that I wasn't going to be fenced in like some cattle or a slave at the stove. A few years ago, my husband decided to cheat on me. He didn't just cheat. He bragged about it to his friends. I did everything possible to save our marriage. We went to consultations and did everything that was required in such cases. It didn't work because he kept seeing this woman of his, and I got tired of it. I divorced him. She stood up from her seat and took a bottle of cold water from the refrigerator. He was having fun to the fullest, and I sat at home and twirled my fingers. I interrupted her to ask, "What did you do?" There was one girl in my paramedic class who was in the same situation. She told me to forget about that bastard and find a new man, so I started on one of the dating sites. I switched from my phone to my computer, where I found a lot of men looking for sex. That's how I started dating. The more I dated, the more I wanted to date. Then I realized that deep down I am an easily accessible girl. I joined a group of people passionate about this lifestyle who get together and have fun. I don't mean having fun like kids do. I mean old-fashioned sexual fun. And it's fun. I date a lot, but I never go out with someone from work or someone I don't have chemistry with. You're still here because I like you, and if I ever decide to have offense again, you could be that man. But you'll have to accept me for who I am, not some wet dream you might have. And you're saying I should stay here while you go out and have sex? Oh, that's worse. Today I'm bringing him home, and you're going to have to listen to all the fun I'm having with someone you don't even know. And you think I'll still be here? I hope so, because for some reason I don't want you to leave. She leaned closer to me and lightly kissed my lips. I need to think about this. It was my turn to kiss her, but I wasn't sure if it would be the last time. I kissed her tenderly and stepped aside. As I watched her walk away to the car, I felt my stomach twist with disbelief and disappointment. But when it was all said and done, I didn't think I could leave. I waited 2 or 3 hours before I changed my mind a second time and decided I couldn't stay. I was writing a note to Jane at her desk when I heard the front door close. Hoping against hope that she was alone, there was the distinct voice of another man. I looked into the corridor and saw Jane and her companion for the night embracing in a passionate kiss. The next moment I found myself in the guest bedroom, listening to the sounds of their lovemaking in the same bed we shared. But it was obvious that she had no place in my life, just as I had no place in hers. I lay on the bed and listened to the sounds. When I heard the door close, I knew it was time for me to leave too. As I reached for the door, I heard Jane calling me. "Don't you dare leave," Jane chided. "If you can handle my lifestyle and learn to enjoy it as much as I do, then we can have a relationship. If not, I'm sorry, then just leave." It took me a second to make a decision. I decided to give this new way of life a chance. It couldn't be that bad. After that first night, we talked a lot about sex and sexual partners. Without thinking twice, it began to seem like a discussion about buying a new coffee maker. It has never been a taboo topic. In fact, it became an expected topic of conversation. She would tell me how many guys tried to pick her up during the day, and I would tell her if I saw a pair of legs or an ass that I would like to hit. Jane had her dates, and I went on dates too. We both seemed very happy with this state of affairs. Oh, sometimes I was jealous, but mostly it was part of the game. Jane even admitted that she too had experienced mild bouts of jealousy more than once. She would say she wanted to have fun, and we would go out and see what would happen. Sometimes nothing happened, but when it happened, it was usually very good. We made a large group of friends that we would play with from time to time. She went out on dates, and I did the same. The main thing that has become the most important in our lives is each other. Every time we played outside of our personal relationships, we reaffirmed that the only person who mattered in our lives was us. One morning, Jane told me that she had heard about a new club that was going to open north of our city. At first, she was delighted, but as she got closer to the opening, she began to have doubts, or so it seemed. "If you have any doubts about this new club, we just won't go," I said, watching her pull the new dress over her head. "No, stupid. I'm fine. I think we'll have a good time tonight, and I won't miss it for the world." I just shook my head and agreed. It really seemed like an opportunity to have fun and meet new people who were practicing what Jane and I called the lifestyle. We arrived a little late, and security was an issue the first night. There were a few surprises that first night. When we finally settled down to look around, we were amazed by the sight. On the dance floor, we saw two people we knew very well, our neighbors, Bill and Alice Johnson. Bill stood at the edge of the dance floor while his wife rubbed herself against a guy who was much younger than her. "What do you think about it?" I asked Jane, pointing to Bill and Alice. "What do you think about this?" Jane pointed to another part of the bar. There, crossing the dance floor towards us, was my ex-wife and her new boyfriend-husband Lover, whoever he was. "Hey, Archie, what's up?" I stood up and smiled. "I never thought I'd see you here." "See, you thought you knew me, but you didn't know anything." She extended her hand to Jane, and the conversation began. I couldn't believe what these two women were talking about. All around us, people were gathering in pairs to do their own thing, and I was stuck listening to my ex tell Jane every detail of her post-divorce life. Edith's new boyfriend was throwing glances at Jane, and I tried to get him to leave and find someone else. Suddenly, I felt the heel of Jane's new shoes hit my shin. Then, like a smart, sly fox, she pretended she had an emergency call. She made up a story about the accident, and we apologized to Edith for having to leave. Before I could say goodbye, I was already being pulled out of the club. As we got into the car to drive back to town, I asked Jane if she was okay. "I thought you couldn't have a phone in the club." "I'm a paramedic, Archie. They should be able to contact me no matter where I am." She spoke in a stern voice, which made me think I was in trouble. I just turned my head and drove back to town. When we arrived at her apartment, she didn't say a word. Something had happened, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know about it, whatever it was. When we walked inside, I was expecting a storm to break out when Jane looked at me very seriously. "Archie, I need to know. Do you love me?" I was taken aback by her question. "Of course I love you. Why do you ask? I tell you every day that I love you." I know you couldn't hear everything Edith said, but tomorrow you and I will get married. She was crying now. "I never thought I would say this to any man, but you are the one who loves me, understands me, and will always protect me. So, if you don't mind, will you marry me?" I noticed something new on Jane's face. For the first time, I noticed peace, calm, comfort on the face of the woman I had just agreed to propose to. I wanted to see this look on this face in my life for the rest of my days. You would think that this would be the end of all our pranks. Oh, my friend, this is just the beginning. Jane and I got married and are still as happy as pigs in mud. We have no children, pets, or plans for this. We're still playing. In case you're wondering, she's currently on a date with a guy who complimented her while she was buying ice cream. I can't wait for her to come home and tell me about all her adventures today. As for things like restrictions, they still exist. You've heard the old saying, "Don't crap where you eat." It's still relevant. Yes, I received my diploma, but we are still a little short of the first million. But we are working on it. By the way, Rusty and Dr. Daniels are now married. Rusty sorted out child support, and everyone wonders who is in charge in their relationship. My guess is Dr. Daniels. It doesn't matter except to Dr. Daniels and Rusty, but it's a good way to start a conversation. And subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.